Western Teacher Live, talking about public education, unionism and much more.
Hello, welcome to a special series of Western Teacher Live, the State School Teachers Union of Western Australia's podcast. This series looks in detail at the agreement in principle regarding the Schools General Agreement 2023. With SSTUWA President Matt Jarman, we'll be going through the negotiations thus far, how voting works, when you can vote, what the potential consequences are of a yes or no vote, and of course details of what is included in the third offer that persuaded Executive to recommend acceptance of what is now termed an agreement in principle. You can also find all of this information online. Go to sstuwa.org.au. When you sign in, and you must sign in, a large pop-up window will appear. Click here for more info and you will be taken to all the information on the agreement in principle. Now that's if you're a member. You will be able to see the detail of the agreement without signing in if you're a non-member, but of course you won't be able to vote. You can find out where and when the next information sessions are, either online or via Zoom or in person at a venue near you. You can also find a voter info pack, summary posters, a comparison between the claim and offers, a full voter info pack, a shorter at-a-glance guide, full details of the proposed district allowances, scenarios for 7 different levels, from graduate teacher to principal, full salary tables for every role, detailed background information on several of the offer components, and of course details on the voting process and what that yes or no vote might mean. So don't take your info from social media, from your well-informed chum who might not even be a member of the union. Do go and find out for yourself. These podcasts can all be listened to in isolation, but we recommend trying to listen to them all, if you can, to get the full picture. So Matt, let's talk about process. How was this log of claims developed in the first place?
Thanks, Bob. The log of claims, of course, was endorsed at the June 2023 State Council by the delegates who were present at the time. It was quite a long process on the Saturday morning to run through each of the 90-odd claims that were in the log. And then, of course, the log went out from June State Council to the membership. We had a very, very high number, much higher than what we had seen any time in the previous decade of members who participated in that vote. And I also think, without remembering specifically, I also remember it being about an 85% approval for the log of claims to be submitted to the employer, which was around about September last year. And since September, some almost 9 months ago, we've been bargaining ever since.
And if you do need to know more about this, by the way, we did do an earlier podcast called How the EBA Process Works. You can find that on the SSTUWA website, sstuwa.org.au. And as you're listening to podcasts, I know you're all very internet savvy, but just do a search for podcasts and they will all pop up for you there. Matt, so we're now at the point of an agreement in principle being recommended by Executive. What's the difference between an agreement in principle and offer, and how do we get to this point?
Well, it has been a long process to get to this point, and I share the frustration of the membership that it's taken to 3 offers, particularly given that the union independently commissioned a report into what was wrong within the state of public education in WA, and the Minister himself also did a review into workload intensification, he called it. Which was ours was released on the November 6th and his was released sometime mid-December last year. So given the fact that the drums have been beating around concerns and widespread concerns, to have to wait 6 months to get the first offer and then 7 months to get to the third offer, I understand the frustration that the membership has, because what we're wanting to see is a good and heart and healthy public education system and it being addressed. The first and the second offer had salary components which were just completely unacceptable to the executive to support going to the membership for a ballot. And by the time the third offer came through, we had lifted the salary component to 12% over 3 years. And of course, we had 51 different offers within the third from government, which we were then able to take out. After some considerable debate within the executive, that debate went on for a couple of days before we agreed in principle for that to be taken to the membership for final say, which is what's about to open up soon with our ballot of our entire membership, which I've said to many, many people before, I find working within and for the SSTU that it is simply one of the most wonderfully democratic organisations that I've ever seen and certainly been part of, and that's effectively what we're doing.
Now, we're going to go into more detail in essence, but why did Executive believe this was the right time?
To send out the third offer? Well, we had taken a significant action on the 23rd of April. There were 21 stop work meetings held across WA. We had the largest union rally held in WA in at least the last 15 years here in Perth. Strong support from not only our membership but also parents and also other organisations who were supporting teachers and the work of teachers through that action. And that action caused government to sit down and immediately review what they were considering to offer, and that was posted in a third offer that had responded to much of what we had not seen in the first and the second, which was workload specifically, as well as incremental salary construction, particularly to retain our most experienced teachers, as well as regional concerns that we were very disappointed didn't appear in the first and the second offer. So, in effect, the action of the 23rd of April prompted the government to respond with a third offer, which is a very significant and comprehensive offer worth a great deal of money from the state coffers. For us to now decide that it was for the membership to consider the offer and vote upon it.
Now, that big turnout, massive day, huge buzz for the people who were involved, whether it was in the march across the Matagarup Bridge to Gloucester Park or whether it was in one of the many regional and smaller events. A lot of bonding going on, a lot of camaraderie there. And a lot of people will say, well, if that was so successful, was it tempting to say no to this offer and do more industrial action?
What will always stick in my mind for the 23rd of April is that it didn't matter where you were in the march or which march you were participating in, whether it be Leinster, Merredin, Perth, Karratha, all over the state. Everybody was saying the same thing, and I find that aspect completely remarkable. And we had a lot of people participating for the very, very first time. The last time we had held an industrial action on that scale was more than a decade ago, and an entire generation of teachers and school leaders are now in our schools. And yes, they are quite addictive. You may wish to be in that space forever, but at the end of the day, an industrial action which cost those members who participated in, and there are reports that there were up to about 12,000 of those, that cost them a half day of their wage to participate in that, and the executive has to take that into account as much as anything else when it's considering the position we're in. And escalating further from a third offer was a significant part of the executive's decision making, as it ought to be. That is simply being responsible. And from one of those kinds of reasons, that's why the executive made the vote to send it out to our membership.
And we should be really clear on this. That doesn't mean that the agreement in principle is accepted, because that's up to the members. So tell us a little bit about when the members can vote and how they can vote.
The member vote won't open until after the June State Council, and that'll be closing on the 4th of July, which is unfortunately in the middle of the school break, but simply because we received the third offer so late in what is already a very long term for teachers and school leaders. We would rather it have been wound up before the school break, because we don't like to necessarily bother our members during the school break period, but we're going to have to on this occasion, and we'll know following on pretty quickly really from the July 4th. It's a simple yes-no vote, what the outcome is, and then we'll inform government of whatever that vote outcome is as well.
And how will people vote, and do they have to be members?
They have to be a member, and this is where the mischievous behaviour of people who are not members in those online forums who are trying to influence our members is a little bit on the frustrating side. These are people who are not paying fees, who are not contributing to the vote, but they are having a very strong say. Whether or not it's being listened to is a completely different issue, of course. But nonetheless, it is a member vote only. It is it's not a compulsory vote. We don't do that, and we wouldn't never do that. But we suspect that we'll have a lot of members who will vote when it does open, and when it does open, that is held off away from senior officers and organisers. That is a completely confidential matter. We will only find out the outcome of the vote after it has been closed. And sorry, Bob, and that's a really important point, because for organisers and senior officers, our job right now is to simply communicate what will happen if we have a yes, what will happen if we have a no, and what the content of the offer is. And we will have to continue to do that quite delightfully, really, talking to our members right up until the end of that voting period.
And that sort of brings me on. So in terms of informing people about what is in the offer and the agreement, obviously we've talked about the written version of the materials. They're all online. People are listening to these podcasts. What's happening in addition to that? Are you going out into workplaces? Are you doing Zooms? What's the story?
We're doing all of the above. We're trying to get to as many schools, informal, formal branch meetings, town hall meetings, online forums for regions as well as statewide. We've obviously got all the materials now up on the member login page to the website. So now that the material and the information is properly flowing out, better questions and better conversations are being had, and that's really important. It is a very significant offer, and it is a very significant period of time for the membership. So there's enough time for everyone to, I know it's a very busy time in schools as well with reporting and end of semester one approaching, but nonetheless it's a very important thing to sit down, have a look at the materials, have a look at it with your colleagues if that's where you prefer, and make an informed choice.
So what's the situation then if the membership has the final say, and they've obviously got their normal choice? You can abstain, but it seems a bit pointless. So you either vote yes or you vote no. What are the consequences if the membership says no, we're not satisfied, we want to go back and take this back into the field of industrial action?
Well, they'll come back to the executive initially, but I think everyone needs to look at what and how this government has responded to other unions who have done something similarly. And we've already had formal correspondence from the West Australian Industrial Relations Commission, which indicates that they clearly intend to intervene. And they have every right to do so. And of course, once the WA IRC is involved, there is an impact on our bargaining power. Their obligation is not to focus on making sure that the fairest deal is delivered. That's what we do as the bargaining team. Their obligation is to make sure that the process has been followed. And that's a very, very important consideration for our members to be aware of, because if the Commission considers that everybody has been participating in good faith, and I don't have any evidence in front of me to suggest that they won't come to that determination, then they can simply turn around and mediate the outcome of the process, and that's the final decision has been made. What we have tried to do, and I think we've done it quite successfully, is stay in the front position, trying to navigate all of this bargaining for our members, and having immediate executive meetings and responding to offers has been part of that strategy. But once we start to lose our position in the bargaining equation, then we start to lose our power, and that's something that our members need to be very well aware of. Government also is not obligated to provide back pay. Back pay is a consequence of good faith bargaining, and whilst we've been doing that, there's no obligation for back pay to be delivered back to the 6th of December 2023. And I suppose just as importantly as anything else, the government itself has demonstrated through negotiation processes with the police and with the nurses' unions that they can come in rather swiftly and just pay the salary component. Now, if that were to occur, all of the conditions, the 51 conditions that are in the third offer, they can effectively be considered quashed. And that is something that our membership also needs to be quite well aware of, that there is no obligation, because there's been nothing that's been formally agreed to, for the government to honour any of those 51 conditions whatsoever. If it is a yes outcome in the ballot, then correspondence goes rather quickly to the government, following on from information going to our membership. And then we go through a technical period of time where the words on the materials that our members are reading right now are converted into more appropriate general agreement language. We're part of that. And then it's straight off to the Commission for registration. And really the Commission will be asked to consider this as a priority because of the size of the workforce and how long these negotiations will have been going by then. And then, of course, flowing on from that, I would imagine that members could expect in one of those August, maybe, pay cycles, they can expect to see the 5% from the December 2023 component if it is a yes, and then of course they'll receive allowances on top of that, and then the 4% from December later on in the year as well.
Okay, and we've mentioned recently, but people can see the information if they're not members of the SSTUWA, excuse me, but you must be a member to vote. So to have a say, you've got to pay your dues and join the union. Can still people do that in time to have their voices heard?
Oh, they certainly can, and we're certainly seeing that as well. There are people who have been joining the SSTU at quite a rate since the very beginning of the year. There's no question that the 23rd of April and indeed the entire industrial process has activated people in schools. They want to be more informed. That is a fantastic outcome for everybody because, it is very important that we have a look at the whole picture of public education right now. The EBA is all but one moment in time. We have a long-term commitment to try to address as many of the issues in public education as we possibly can. At the moment, you could call the backdrop of that facing the facts, where we have a on-the-record commitment of a couple of years to get through those 47 key recommendations. The EBA, incidentally, Bob, the third offer of the EBA, it directly connects to 19 of those 47 recommendations from facing the facts. And if you had said to me back on November 6 last year that by May our membership would be considering a third offer that hits 19 of the 47 recommendations, I would have thought that you were unemployable. But quite frankly, that is exactly what's been achieved in that third offer, and that is a remarkable outcome for facing the facts, which is all about trying to fix public education.
Excellent. So there's your intro to how you can vote, where you can find the info, and why it is so important to understand what the consequences are of a yes or a no vote, because at the end it's your choice. So we're now going to move on, and we hope that you'll enjoy the next segment of this Western Teacher Live. Matt, let's talk then about salaries, levels and allowances. Obviously, whenever a pay negotiation is going on, the only thing that the media in particular talks about is salaries. It's one of over 90 claims within this agreement, of course, but people are keen. They want to maximise their income, and most importantly of all, they would like to get ahead of the cost of living. And of course, the history of this is that there was a $1,000 cap imposed on public sector pay by the McGowan government when it first came in. It was a budget reduction or deficit reduction process, and public servants were the easiest weapon to use. That $1,000 cap was eventually given the boot 2 years early, but was in for 4 years. Given the boot thanks to member action from the SSTUWA alongside its Public Sector Alliance colleagues. Then there were more fixed increases, which were a significant jump from $1,000, but unfortunately then came along at a time when inflation was rampant and cost of living rises. So that's left teachers in a bit of a pickle in terms of the cost of living. Now, after many years, the Cook government restored proper bargaining. So there was no bargaining going on for the last couple of agreements. It was, this is what you're getting. There's no conversation here, particularly on salaries. So how does this agreement, given that the union or the Public Sector Alliance ask was for 12% over 2 years, what is the offer on the table?
The offer, as put to members at the moment, is for 5% in the first year, 4% and 3% in the out year. All of the economic information that we were receiving from both the state government as well as independently sourced and reported to the executive has been reporting, and even we've seen it recently, Bob, in the state and federal budget outlooks, is that economic conditions are going to start, they're cautiously predicting so, but are going to start to slowly improve. With regards to the point of CPI, the 5, 4 and 3 puts us in front of where CPI is expected to be. Now, one of the often stated pieces of feedback from members is, but we're not making up for what happened a couple of years ago with the 8% inflation rate and those kinds of things. I would not say that it's never happened, but I would say it's very rare for a pay offer to come come in and recognise past economic factors and try to rectify that. Most that I can certainly remember pay offers have just looked at the economic conditions of the day and had a look at what are those going forward for that cycle of the EBA. And this one certainly has us in front of the state and federal government's predicted CPI for WA, which is a little bit different to the nationals, in that it'll be across the 3 years 2.5% better than where CPI is at. 1% for the first year, 1% for the second year, and 0.5% for the third. The salary component is significant as a consideration for members. Of course it is, because the cost of living pressures, particularly for those people in rental accommodations in that market, and also with the other costs, particularly attributed to food and fuel, which is to almost everybody, of course, is something that is hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel for. Those costs are impacting all of us on a fortnightly basis. So salary is very significant, but looking forward for a 5, 4 and 3, it does have us, by comparison to forecasts, in a better position.
I suppose what some people do is they sit back, but you wanted 7. And you've only got 5. There's sometimes no understanding that the initial claim, which is a public sector alliance joint claim, is set at a point which, let's be honest, you're not expecting to get that. Sometimes getting half of it would be seen as a victory. So do you think this is a reasonable offer salary-wise, given the reality of bargaining? I mean, obviously you'd like to get 7 or 8 or 9, but in the real world, is this a reasonable salary offer?
Prior to the wage, yes. In short, prior to the wages policy being announced late December last year, across the public sector alliance, we thought we would be lucky to get 3% in the first year. So we started to discuss internally across the alliance what our media response might be. Should it be 0 to 3, and what it would be if it would be 3 and 4? And we didn't bother going above 4.5% really, because we just didn't see that coming. The first offer for the first year was 4.75%, which told us across the alliance that the government is well aware that it was not going to get away with a very skinny salary component. So lifting them to 12% in our component. We have one other union who has settled their agreement in principle through their membership, and quite a significant yes received 5, 4 and 3.5, but that particular union has no conditions attached to them. They have one new salary increment level, which is, I believe, for 110 of their officers. We also have a salary increment. We actually have a couple when you take into consideration some of the issues we've got for some of our school leaders in this third offer. But that main salary increment offer for senior teachers will impact 9,500 people. So by far our salary and our conditions is very, very expensive and very significant. And it's part of what the new wages policy position is from this state government.
And in addition to the flat sort of salary rates that go across the years, so 5, 4 and 3% respectively, there have also been some significant offers made around allowances and around specific levels for, let's say, senior teacher, for example, level 3 classroom teachers and level 3 principals. Take us through some of those, starting with the grad allowance.
Yeah, well, our graduates are currently sitting on $78,000 per annum. This pay offer lifts them to 87. My apologies. I've just robbed them of $2,000 there. $87,000, and that takes them up to the top of the graduate pay scales when compared to anywhere else in the country. And by lifting the graduate allowance from $1,600 to $2,000, that certainly puts them well above. The next focus salary increment level that you mentioned is level 3 principals who run very complex small schools. The demanding job of the level 3 principal is far different to when I did it back in the late 1999 to 2001 period. It's far different and far more complex and challenging now. So they will all now begin on level 3.3 and move through to level 4.2. So that is a significant incentive when compared to people who are sitting in the metropolitan area, for example, who are level 3 deputies and are thinking about the principal trail. There's now a financial incentive for them to look at those level 3 smaller school communities. Level 5 district high schools always used to be level 5 and 6, and over the last 10, 15 years, that's been adjusted to reflect the number of students in the school. I would suggest that the level 5 district high school offer is probably one of the most attractive employment opportunities within the offer, in that, again, if you're looking to see whether or not you'd like to be a school leader, you can now go out to a wheat belt. There are 56 of them, I think, around the state or anywhere else district high school, with a smaller number of students, but you're on a significantly higher pay scale than what you will be in Perth as a head of department or a program coordinator or a level 3 deputy principal. So they become very attractive options, and in some people's cases you would be earning an extra up to $30,000 more by the end of this offer if you took up one of those district high school positions. The senior teacher one, as I mentioned before, we have about 9,500 senior teachers within our system. These are people that we fought for in bargaining, because these are the people we most need to retain in many ways. We've been losing our 2.8, 2.9 and senior teachers because of workload related matters. So what we have now is a salary increment. They are currently on $117,000. To qualify for what is now known as the new Senior Teacher 2, most of these people, Bob, are already doing 3 and 4 additional responsibilities in their school. So this is both a workload impact and a salary offer within this. For those people who wish to continue to do the responsibilities, or they want to reduce them down to 2 responsibilities, they will immediately jump from $117,000 to $125,000, and ultimately by the end of the term of this agreement they'll be at $134,000, which is a very significant salary increase compared to everybody else across the board. And I hope that works for the 2.789 teacher who wishes to go on and to use their expertise in the school setting. They probably already are doing it quite informally with mentoring and counselling of new people to the school, whether they be graduates or not. And as for the level 3 classroom teacher pilot, this is only for 40 locations. This is about demonstrating to the system, including the department when I say that the 0.1, which comes with this level 3 classroom pilot, the 0.1 is critically important to the success of a school. Back in my principal's days at Middle Swan, I had 6 level 3 teachers. They all had 0.1 at that time. And for 0.1 of the week, they were helping with the phase planning, the curriculum, the instruction, mentoring new staff, lesson design and planning. All of that's been taken away. And all of that has become the responsibility of the principal and the deputy, which has ramped up their workload. So if we can demonstrate to the department through this pilot of 40 level 3 classroom teachers who, by the end of the agreement, will be on $147,000, which is a very significant incentive, I hope, that the 0.1 works, it makes schools better outcomes for students because of the 0.1, then I'm sure that we'll have more to bargain with to get that 0.1 back. There are 1,200 or thereabouts level 3 teachers in our system, and we need to build a metric and a narrative to get that 0.1 back.
And above all of that, all of those incentives and improvements and a recognition of the actual work that people like level 3 classroom teachers are doing, the recognition of senior teachers and the work of principals at various levels, there is a really significant change too in this offer, which sees a shift from locality allowances to district allowances for lots of regional teachers, not for all, but for a lot of people. This is quite significant.
This is a legacy matter from this offer. There are a number of wins in the third offer, which I would broadly describe as legacy considerations for the membership. This is one of them. Locality allowances, as most people appreciate and share the point of view, have been stalled for some time. They're not worth a great deal of money, and they've certainly fallen well behind cost of living. I can think of a small level 3 town right now where you earn $383 to live there. That will jump to $2,500 to be there per annum. That's a small example. If I were to go to a Kimberley or Pilbara example, I would be talking about an improved district allowance from the locality of $3,500 to $4,000. So this is something that we get to build upon. we have been informally asked by government to be part of the review for the district allowances, which will start towards the end of the year, which means we will go in there and make sure that those locations where the district allowance is currently not scheduled and applies is considered for and argue for their case as much as a town that's only 70 or whatever k's down the road from them who's missing out. So the district allowance is very, very significant. It's also part of what people who are in Perth who may be drawn to some of the other components of the offer, like the right to return to your staffing position after 3 years if you go to a regional location, or to a school leadership position if you wish to go out there for 3 years. You might be drawn to a location that's got a healthy district allowance on from the current locality allowance, making the financial package so much more attractive whilst you're also developing other skills as a moment in time within your career.
And for those of you playing along at home, it's very difficult to keep track of those district allowances, but luckily we've done the work for you. So when you go to sstuwa.org.au, you'll see that pop-up window. It will lead you into the details of the agreement in principle. One of the info sheets you will find on there is each of the district allowances, plus a comparison with what the locality allowances are that are currently paid. So you'll be able to see which area you're in, does it apply to you, how much is it? And as Matt said, there are some significant amounts. There is also, for those of you who are really nerdy about this sort of thing, you can find a 2010 Act under which these district allowances were first introduced, and is also the 2019 amendments, which will give you the new rates that were introduced in 2019 on an annual basis. Now, those rates are already in our charts, but it just gives you that original info and gives you the chance to do your own research. So, as Matt has suggested, in terms of salary and allowances, there is the headline, which gives you an increase above the cost of living, albeit not a huge one, but an increase every year. And then there are the district allowances and a number of individual areas where teachers will be better off. Now, Matt, talking about that, within the materials that we've put together, and I think this is a good time to do it, perhaps we could just highlight a couple of areas. And what you can do as a member or a non-member now, you can go and have a look online and you can see each, I think there's 7 in all, scenarios that are laid out. And Matt, you might just maybe starting with the grad teacher, give us a little idea of maybe a couple of those, because people can go on and read them on their own, but maybe the senior teacher, the grad teacher and the regional principal might be good examples.
Yeah, well, the graduate teacher is in the third offer faced with a gross salary increase of just over $10,000 or 12.73%. The level 2.1 graduate teacher currently would receive $88,178, and that on top of that, with the $2,000, as I mentioned before, $2,000 for the graduate allowance takes the total pay to $90,178. As I think I mentioned before in a separate podcast, the highest other grad allowance in the country at the moment is $85,000. So $90,000 to kick off and start your career from, that's before district allowances and any other CTPs or anything along those lines that you might be available to receive is included in your package.
And I think off the top of my head, that puts them in the top 2 nationally now. It's not quite there. There's just one state, South Australia maybe, on the salary component alone, which is ahead. But we're ahead of everybody else for graduate teachers.
The graduate teacher who's in a regional school on level 2.2, they might be working in Broome. They have a gross salary starting point of $90,000. That'll increase to $105,000, just short of $106,000 actually, which is a 17.5% or 17.65% increase by the end of the agreement in December 2025. So a significant increase for those people who are in the Kimberley and the Pilbara. You really do need to look upon what it is per location, but nonetheless it is there. But I also recognise that there is also cost of living pressure there as well. For my mind, the right of return for teachers is as attractive as as the graduate allowances. So if you're someone who's in a metropolitan or southwest school and you wish to go to one of these locations, now's not a bad time to have a look at that. If you're a permanent person, you've got a right of return. You can come back to your school in 3 years' time under this offer.
And what about you getting towards the other end of the scale? So you've done your initial hard work, you've stayed with teaching, and heavens, that's a commitment because it's been a very difficult time and we've lost a lot of teachers. But they've hung in there and now are a senior teacher. Significant benefits there with the new level?
Well, again, I would go as far to say anytime you get a new salary increment and it is about retention as well as reducing workload, which this one is, then you've established a legacy matter that not only this group of senior teachers will benefit from, but also the next group of senior teachers will benefit from, and that's those people in the 2.789 range. Look, the public education system has forever run on in-kind support, and I can put my house on it that there are people who are in the 2.789 range who are helping other people out and qualifying for that senior teacher responsibility already. They simply need to get to meet the criteria of being eligible for senior teacher, and then the salary component of senior teacher 1 and then the new part for senior teacher 2 kicks in. And it's not to be sneezed at. You would be looking at someone who is on a 2.9 at the moment, who by the end of the offer will be a potential. That's on $113,000, who if they qualified for senior teacher 1, that will make them eligible for 2, that would put the pay scale at $134,000 in just a few years' time. So that is a very significant increase. The 2.9 salary teacher on $113,500 at the moment, over the course of a 3-year deal, that would then go to $127,000 or just almost $128,000 with this pay offer, which is a gross increase of more than $14,000.
And while we're talking about that, the SSTUWA is the union for all educators in public schools, and that means that it's not just trying to hive off one section of the teacher workforce and say, hey, look, we've got a great deal for you, just leave everybody else behind. And very important with that, we've got a very significant and highly valued principal membership. So if one of those principal members is in a regional area, let's take a shot at Kalgoorlie, because that happens to be the example we've put in the book. And it's not a real example, but it is a genuine example of where the action will so it's not an individual, but it is the level. Where will they be after this agreement, if this agreement gets voted in?
Well, okay. A level 5-3 teacher is currently on $163,000. Then they receive the locality allowance, which will be replaced by the district allowance. The district allowance goes from $432 to $2,354 for Kalgoorlie, which is an increase from locality to district of a staggering 445%. Such is the value of the district allowance component of the offer. So by 2025, a level 5.3 principal will now be a level 5.4 principal, and they will be on $186,000 by the time of that agreement, which doesn't include the district allowance. That'll be on top of that. So that'll be closer to $188,000 from 5.3 to 5.4 by the life of this agreement in Kalgoorlie.
Okay, and you can find all of these scenarios and a number more. I said there's 7 in all, going from graduate teacher through to mid-career senior teacher, level 3 classroom teacher, deputy principal. And you can find all of those in the full info kit online. And of course, with full salary tables and charts and all of the allowance information, you can actually sit down and work out your own scenario as it suits you too, both now and wherever you might like to be in the future. So the salary and allowance situation is pretty comprehensive. We hope we've given you a lot of info on that, and that a reminder you can find it all online and do your own checking if you need to.
Just one final word, Bob. I really think people need to look at those salary tables to see where they are at now and where they will be at the end of the life of this agreement, which is December 2025. Such is the long period of time that bargaining can take up within the life of a new agreement. So by November 2025, we're going to start to need to talk about a new log of claims.
Please don't say that.
That's how quickly, I know, but that's how quickly the turnaround is. So look at where you are now, look at where you will be, and keep that in mind.
Actually, just one thing we should probably mention too, that 3-year agreement is quite important. That's the government wanted the 3 years. Previously, these agreements have been for 2. So it does give people a little bit more time to reap the benefits, and just changes the timeline slightly, as you said, although it's so compressed because there's such a long gap, particularly in this set of negotiations, it all compresses down and within a year you're back negotiating again.
That's right, and everybody gets a little bit of EBA fatigue, not just those people in the bargaining team, but people in schools, importantly, as well. The important point to make here, of course, is the relationship of the bargaining cycle to the electoral cycle. We know that in WA there will be a state government election held in March next year. So a 3-year agreement, we then look at the next election cycle, which have actually been part of our planning all along and part of the executive's consideration. So we're quite aware of what the impact of a 3 and a 2 agreement would have looked like, a 2 and a 3-year agreement would look like. And I just want to reassure membership that all of that kind of forward thinking from 2025 to 2029 is already part of executive's consideration for hoping to get the best out of each of those deals for our membership and for public education.
That's excellent, Matt. So we have now discussed salaries. We've talked about conditions, we've talked about the vote, we've talked about Bob smashing the mic with his wrist, and all the important things. Let's move on to improvements to conditions. So this, again, all of this information is supplied in your large guide, and it's been broken down into the way the offer was presented. So the claims are made in a particular way. You might be, if your members familiar, a part of that process, the work of teaching and leading and system support and attraction and retention. So as the offer has come in, it's been segmented into improvement to conditions initially, and we will go through that. And then there are workload reduction initiatives, and there are funding-related commitments. So let's have a quick squiz, Matt, at the improvements to conditions. I'd like to start you off, even though it's not right at the top of the list, I think it's second. But I do think it's important. A lot of our members, the banners that were being waved around at the rally, etc., and also a very public commitment we made around class sizes. Now, there is no commitment across the board to reduce class sizes. I think the government put a figure on which actually related to every class having to be reduced, which was a bit misleading. But what are the gains in here about class sizes that executive finds significant, that you find significant, and that you think our members will find significant as sort of opening the door to a longer-term push to get class sizes mandated at lower sizes?
There's no getting away from the disappointment of not getting the cold, hard reduction in class sizes. We needed, and we have been very successful, I think, across the entire membership in communicating with the broader community the importance of the complexity in our classrooms right now. That in of itself is a win. What we have in this offer are very, very tight forms of language around how classes will be configured. No more will it say we will consider configuring our classes. This is will. This is very clear language. Now, I can see a day when class sizes are reduced in terms of their metric, and then these general agreement conditions about what will be done are going to be playing off with one another. The number of students in the class, for example, with documented plans, which is in this offer. So, yes, we did not get our end game on class size reductions, but we certainly have the strongest and tightest language around class size configuration and who should be getting a documented plan and who should not be. And that is now shifted into the general agreement. So there's no hiding from it for any of our members, whether they be teachers or school leaders. And they are on those opening pages. I urge all of our members to read the rear attachments, which go into this very clearly.
I'd just like to bring you back a little bit to that. So I'm a teacher. I've been asked to take a class that exceeds the minimum recommendation. But using the current wording of the agreement, the department has said you've got to run that class. Your school leader has been told they will, not they should, but they will offer you support. What's the difference? There's the word will, but what comes into that support allocation now if this agreement is agreed to?
Well, we do know that the distribution of student challenges is not often even. It's not often equitable. And we also know that the workload that comes with documented plans is out of control. So all of that has been impacted upon by these conditions. Consultation and agreement with staff, but also, as can be read about in the booklet a little bit later on, what to do if you have a situation for your classroom configuration is not agreeable. So there's a very clear appeal process that is referred to in the new documentation that members should read as well.
So you've got class sizes, we've got documented plans, how many kids have them, what percentage of the people have them, and then that support will, and we keep emphasising the word will because it sounds semantic, but will's very different to should, will be given. Along with that, your documented plans being allocated only to those kids who really, really need them is significant. What about professional learning in this improvements to conditions? Because that was another area. I think even, if I might say it, the people at the union were quite surprised the roar that went up when professional development was discussed at the Metro rally. I think surprised a few people. It's obviously strong feeling out there.
Well, what's been going on within and across the system is that we've got third-party private providers coming in and effectively telling our members what they should be doing and to do it in their own time. That, coupled with the concerning rise of online professional learning, which is particularly for our regional members, and this came out through in the Face the Facts consultation period as well, they are being asked to do it in their own time. So they're being asked to do PL that they didn't agree to, that they don't need to do in their own time. And it's not just 2 or 3 hours. In some cases, it's hundreds of hours. And I can think of one particular course which is 120 hours of your own time across the course of an entire year. So we had a variety of claims that members can still read in the log with regards to professional learning, and they've all been addressed and broken down in here. The most significant legacy matter to do with professional learning is not the fact that, as one of the offers clearly states, your additional online now is at your discretion, but it's the fact that the State School Teachers Union, as a party to the agreement, is now back in the Professional Learning Institute. If our members read Clause 54 of the General Agreement, they'll read exactly what the Professional Learning Institute should be delivering. And we are, of course, accusing the department of being in breach of that agreement by not providing what it says in Clause 54. We are now back to the table where we were 20 years ago to have an instructive say as to what should be delivered to our teachers particularly, as well as our heads of department, program coordinators, deputy principals and school psychs, and our casual staff members as well, because all of those are covered in Clause 54. So again, we're not going to see the fallout and the impact of that, but that is another one of these things that's in this offer that will have significant and long-term benefit and gain for our membership, and that was one of the Facing the Facts recommendations as well.
And as you mentioned, just to reiterate that, what we've done is tagged, there's a couple of questions I think people have quite rightly asked. What difference did the rally make, and what difference did Facing the Facts make in terms of this? So when you go online and you look at the improvements, what we've done is we've tagged them. So if you see our little blue protester banner with the raised fist, those are the items that were included in an offer 3. They were not in offer 2. It was only after the rally took place that each of those items was added into the offer. And it's been significant. In terms of salary, it added 1% in the middle range, if I remember correctly. That might not seem a lot, but then added up when you do your cumulative interest across those percentages. And also, we've got a little tag for Facing the Facts. So in both of those situations, in all of these documents, you'll be able to track what your actions actually delivered from the rally.
That's right. And I want to reassure the membership that the links to Facing the Facts are not tenuous. We've had a look at the recommendations from Facing the Facts and what's in the offer. They are strongly correlating and impacting upon those. So, great job by the comms team to have them promoted to everybody. And I don't think you can flick through the booklet without seeing a variety of them.
As you mentioned, 19, I think, for Facing the Facts, and I think there's around a dozen that were immediately a result of the rally. So there are so many claims that are addressed in here. We'll be here all day if we go through them all. I'm going to pick out a couple which I think are quite interesting. So what you think? Long service leave?
Well, the long service leave is one of those claims that we've had for years. So much like class size reduction, we've been asking for long service leave for the first access to long service leave. At 7 years for many, many agreements, and we've got it in this one. So, again, for those mid-career 2.5, 2.67 teachers, we wanted something in there. We argued for it quite strongly, particularly following on from the 23rd of April. So if you want to find a claim or an example of a claim, I would strongly direct members to the long service leave. That is a consequence of their action. For anyone in the membership who is less than 54 years of age, that has positive impact for you. But for our newest educators, this is something that generations of graduate teachers before you long wanted, and now it's in the offer.
So that's, as you say, a legacy issue. You pick one next.
Look, I think we shouldn't miss out on union rep time. I mean, again, if I'm going to call out a few legacy matters, strong schools have strong branches and vice versa. And we want to work collaboratively within our school environment. We want our school leaders and our branch reps to all be communicating regularly. And to do that in our very busy schedules in our schools, we need allocated time to do so. And that's exactly what's been won in this offer. So for my mind, again, this is something that not only the public education system at a local level within a school, but also the union wins from, and is a very significant win. Again, another example of something that we have been arguing for a very, very long time.
And so we're talking at the moment about improvements to conditions. There are a number that go across the public service. Superannuation on unpaid parental leave is one small example of that. And a number of things directed towards school leader performance management, for example.
Well, in the last agreement, members might remember that we won a consistent approach to teacher performance management, and now if we have a teacher, and we've had multiple examples of this, who is asked to do a whole variety of other colourful things instead of that consistent mandatory approach, then we are able to intervene, and we can do it on solid ground because it's in the general agreement. That is now the case also for deputy principals, heads of department and level 3 program coordinators. So again, a very significant outcome across a very big part of our membership.
And in terms of things that were gained from the rally, just by handy blue logo there, internal relief rates for principals and deputy principals.
Yeah, well, it's always been scheduled, and now we're talking about putting an actual process so it can be more easily accessed. I do find that particular one is already happening in many schools, but now it's going to be constructed into the general agreement, which is important.
And I think one of those things, isn't it? This brings consistency across the school system where people are doing the right thing, but it's not enshrined. There is a chance some people to not do the right thing. Now it is part of the agreement. So we're moving fairly smoothly here on to workload reduction initiatives. And I want to mention one which I think is obviously extremely significant, and that is the establishment of a joint workload intensification task force between the union, the other signatories to the agreement, but most significantly a direct line to the minister for it to report issues to. Workload has consistently, survey after survey, when we've done our state of school stuff every year or so, it's not been salaries, interestingly enough, that's been the biggest issue. By far the biggest issue, well, still important, but by far the biggest issue has been workload. How important is this?
This is really important, and so is this task force. This is not a task force that can afford to be a talk fest. So we have to look at who's creating the work, what's the work that they're creating, and then what are we going to do about it? So the what are we going to do about it is the bit that we all want to see resolved. Well, we're going to do that through the ministerial office. This is a minister who put out a red tape reduction, workload intensification task force, whatever it is really called, report. This is not a minister that wishes to see the problems of the public education system continue unabated. He wishes to address them. So what we will ask for now is a selection of our membership to best represent the situation that we have in our public schools to the minister himself and talk about exactly what it looks like. But the three criteria that I just mentioned, I think effectively could be considered, if, barring some negotiation, the terms of reference, which is who's creating the work, what's the work they're creating, and then what are we going to do about it? Because we can no longer afford school leaders and teachers to be leaving the public education system during this period of shortage because of workload that could be mitigated or could be reduced or completely addressed. We often hear that it's work that is being constructed at a regional level, or we hear that it's work that's being constructed at a school level. It doesn't really matter anymore. What matters is what we're going to do about it. And we needed a tool, and this is the tool. This is the most effective way that we could probably put it on the table for the life of this agreement, so that when we get to the end of this agreement, we can turn around and say, right, all of those workload pressures that we were confronted with leading up to 2023-24, we've addressed them as the Teachers' Union.
And over and above what we've just discussed about class management and the provision of support resources, within the workload reduction initiatives, areas that teachers have long identified, aren't they, are the management of complex behaviour, classroom support, trying to get small group tuition running with very limited resources. Those are two very significant developments in the workload reduction field. Is that fair enough to say?
With the classroom support, small group tuition, I'd urge members to read the rear of the document, because as far as this offer goes, it's detailed into what it would look like or should look like in a school in the rear of the document. We took lessons from how it had not gone so successfully in other states around the country, and we made sure that they were built in or that we were protecting ourselves from them, which is what members will be able to read in the rear. I do not see classroom support, small group tuition as any replacement for class size reductions. The class size reduction continues to be something that we will continue to campaign upon, but this initiative certainly may have impact. Most importantly, the small group teacher is a fully registered teacher who is totally responsible for the teaching, learning and assessment cycle of those students. They have a liaison responsibility with the mainstream teacher, but they do not have, but the mainstream teacher does not have the TLA for those students because of the registered teacher who's taking responsibility for. And it says in the attachment, and we urge school leaders to do their very best with this, try to fence these people off from internal relief pressures as well, because even though there's going to be a circumstance where that does happen, if we continue to just see these people as a pool of internal relief responders, then we're going to end up not getting very far. And of course, this is a group of students who are going to be identified through the department metrics as most needing that support, which will again help hopefully have a workload impact for the mainstream teacher by allowing them to focus upon the students that they've got in front of them for those periods of the week. It is across literacy and numeracy, and we argued at the table for it to be expanded from a range of 0.1 to 1 FTE. So I suspect the larger primary schools and the larger senior high schools will have an allocation of 0.8 to 1 FTE to distribute across the schools. And that is good, and that the 0.1, 0.2 is obviously for the much smaller settings.
And in addition to that, complex behaviour management, it looks like additional resources being put into that.
Since the 2019 agreement, the SSTU has been working as the only other party to the agreement around behaviour management and complex behaviour in particularly. One of the things that has sprung out of that has been a complex behaviour management professional learning program, which is currently has just commenced in 40 schools. We spoke to school leaders and teachers who are part of that 40, and they were very, very supportive of where it was and where it was going to take them. It comes with FTE for the schools, so to argue for greater investment in that, taking them from 40 to 192 schools, is what we consider to be a success from the 23rd of April. And it's, this is the sort of thing that we have to invest in, and we have to make sure that we're there for, and we have to make sure that it works. But until we've done that, we can't really judge its success. But I can certainly look upon those members who are part of it at the moment, and I trust their educational instinct, and if they're backing it in, then that's good enough for me.
And of course, these are the sorts of things that they will be able to be monitored by this joint task force rather than just the department saying, well, we don't like it, so we'll say it isn't working. Not that they do that, of course. I also want to bring you a couple of significant things. Even before I came and worked for the State School Teachers Union, as a complete layperson, it seemed a bit strange what had happened around staff placement, particularly if people wanted to go and try their careers or extend their careers and their leadership aspirations out into country and regional areas. And I'll be honest with you, when I first arrived, that looked inviolate. It looked as though they were gone forever. There wasn't going to be any change in terms of the system. Two very significant developments, well, perhaps more than two, but certainly two extremely significant developments. Tell us about the staff placement issues.
I think you're quite right, Bob. But if you'd said 12 months ago you're never going to crack open the staffing lockdown that we have in the system right now, then most people would have been in that position. But what we have here is two offers that impacts both school leader opportunities and teaching opportunities to go out to regional settings, and they have a guaranteed right of return back to their current spot. And as it states in the attachment detail later on in the offer, the IPS principal may have had once upon a time an authority to say no, but they don't under the terms of these pilots for the life of the agreement. So I would encourage people to have a look at the opportunities in their career. I spent 14 years out in regional WA, and I'd do my 14 years again because it's such a wonderful place to work and teach. And lots of other things come of that as well. So we need to continue to find ways to chip into the staffing lockdown that we have, the congestion that is staffing, and these two parts of the offer are a really significant chip away at it.
Good to hear. And just a little one, you get lots of these very significant, broad issues. One small one that I've noticed, and I know, again, it's been something that people have been asking for a long time, part-time principals. Tell us about that.
Since the documents went out last week, I've had a number of principals contact the office to ask how can they possibly apply. Part-time principals is we have to develop the framework and put it into place, but effectively this is about looking after those people who have contributed 35, 40 years to the system and they want to continue to contribute, but they can't maintain a 5-day-a-week position. Or this is that person who's returning from maternity leave or parental leave. Or this is that person who's looking after a family member who's very, very dear to them, but they can't continue to work full-time while they're going through that period in their life. So there is a number of different opportunities in here, and it is about making sure that we retain this kind of experience and wisdom and not just coldly lose it, which is what happens out of all of the class that we have within our membership. This is the class who turns around the most and simply leaves because we don't have part-time opportunities for them.
And anything that does that obviously addresses the teacher shortage. Now, there are a whole range too of funding-related commitments. As we've said many times, getting through everything is really difficult. So I'm going to give you the some wisdom of Solomon here. Give me two more that we haven't mentioned that you might think are worth a mention, with the reiterated advice to go and check out the entire document because there is so much on offer. It won't all apply to individuals, but a lot of it does. And, of course, the individual groups that get little bits and pieces all add up. Maybe performance management might be one worth a mention.
It's not fair for you to say I can only select two.
I'm just conscious that people, have their lives to live.
I completely appreciate that. So we have teachers, predominantly teachers, who have been through some awful experiences through classroom observation. Yet in the back of the exchange of letters from the 2019 and 21 agreements, we had some very, very clear explanations as to what classroom observation should look like. That now shifts from the rear of the exchange of letters to the general agreement. So I would urge every teacher who feels as if they are being observed outside of what those conditions are to make sure that they read the response to Claim 13 that it was for us. Look, another school leader one, I'll touch on two more. I'm going to break your rule there. Sorry, Bob.
Well, I did one, so you can still have your two.
Yeah. The right of return for school leaders is incredibly important to not only school leaders who want to give back to the system by taking on 3-year or 12-term positions, principal advisor, collegiate principal and so on, and they can return back to that system level position. But it's also an incentive as well. So the right of return for school leaders, for my mind, is very significant. And then I can't prioritise which of the district high school funding continuing for the life of the agreement continues to be very, very important. That first started in the last agreement when we had a massive teacher shortage and we weren't able to get full staff into our district high schools. So this 3-year period provides the district high schools with an opportunity to try to get some success from that additional funding. And then the aircon subsidy being extended. The climate and the issues within the climate are certainly not changing at the moment, and the travel concessions to the Kimberley, Pilbara and Goldfields have been very, very popular and appreciated by our members. Being able to get back down to the metropolitan area or wherever they need to 3 times per annum has made a great deal of difference in the decision to stay where they're working. So we didn't get those two particular aspects until the final offer, and I want to reassure members we really had to fight for those.
And I can assure you, reading backwards is difficult, but you can see the big logos. And I'm reckoning there's about 20 items, give or take, that came about after the rallies. So there is absolutely no doubt of the impact that industrial action had. You can see photos from that. You'll see it in the next issue of Western Teacher. You can watch the video that was done of the Metropolitan Rally. We've got photos from all over Western Australia that'll be on a few posters around the place, and also, as I just mentioned, in Western Teachers. So the rallies not only created a buzz, but they made a huge difference. I want to thank Matt Jarman for joining me. This has been a longish process, so if you've made it through the entire podcast in one go, congratulations. If you've chosen to choose segments, absolutely fine too. We wanted to give you the choice of that. Please remember, however you followed the podcast, that you can go and check all of this information at SSTUWA.org.au, because it may sound like we've gone into great detail. I can assure you we've barely scratched the surface. There are a whole lot of things in this offer we haven't had time to mention, and there is an enormous amount of detail behind some of those most significant offers. So go to SSTUWA.org.au, a pop-up window will come up. Click here for more, and you'll be taken to all of the information. It is now being made available to non-members to view, but you can only vote if you are a member. You can join online as well. So, Matt, I think we'd probably like to close by thanking all of our members who took part in that action on the 23rd of April across Western Australia, because they have made a massive difference.
Well, it's worth asking what we would have had in the third offer had we not had that position taken from our members. We had the largest rally, and I dare say we sent a shiver through the entire state government, a state government that has 53 out of 59 seats in the House. And we intimidated them into what is now just short of $1 billion offer. And that needs to be considered when we get to the yes and no position as well, because governments have long memories and they will remember what the cause and the consequence of the 23rd of April was. So I think the entire membership, including all of the executive and the senior officers in this instance together, have been very powerful, and the consequence of that is that we've got an offer for our members to consider, which is going to go a significant way immediately and over the longer term in addressing the issues that we've got. EBAs don't fix everything, but they are a very significant moment of time. They've never fixed everything, and I think that we can look back on this offer and say that we've got a lot being addressed.
And if you were on those rallies, that was an incredibly important action. And the next most important, or equally important, will be casting your vote. So keep an eye out for all the voting details. If you're a member, please check your e-news regularly. If you've unsubscribed, you can go online and resubscribe. Really important. That's how to get the up-to-date information, and the vote will take place just after State Council, finishing on July 4. So keep your eye on your e-news for that update. Thank you to Matt Jarman. I've been Bob Figg, and thank you all for listening to Western Teacher Live.
Western Teacher Live, cutting through noise on public education and union issues.